Hi, I'm Greg Lewis, and welcome to the guided tour of my ePortfolio. Tonight I will be your commentator and conductor who will try and take you through a quick synopsis of the electronic representation of my journey in the Masters of Educational Technology program at UBC. We are currently on the home page using a blog supplied by WordPress.com. My reasoning for using this format was that I wished to spend more time writing and reflecting rather than learning a completely new presentation tool where the frustration level might be quite high. The other reason I chose this environment was that I tried to write posts every 3 to 5 days, reflections that I made while taking the final course, ETEC 590. The tabs you see at the top will guide you through much of my ePortfolio. There is a small description about me. There is my ePortfolio proposal. The navigation tab tells the viewer about the different sections of the EP. And finally, there are my reflections via posts that I made while taking this course, where I connected past learning to situations that I encountered in the course or at school. My homepage is pretty simple in many ways. I wanted a very straightforward look that wouldn't confuse those wanting to read what I had to say. I tried to keep the number of items in the menu and pages shown on the right side to a minimum. At the bottom of each page, there is a link back to the home page. The header image you see at the top is of Nile Creek, where pink and coho salmon spawn each year and where I have fly fished extensively. It's a magical place where the salmon return to further their species. Speaking of silverfish, the metaphor I have chosen to use involves the stages in the life of a coho salmon. The first link on the sidebar takes you to a diagram showing the continuum that occurs year in and year out. I liken this natural occurrence to my experience in the Met, my learning, the work some students have produced, and the reflections that I have made about my own growth in regards to learning before, during, and by the end of the Met program. Each life stage is a link to a page where the metaphor is further explained and developed. Like all metaphors, it is not a perfect fit, but I believe overall that it is appropriate and works well. I will briefly go through each stage. Spawning. This is a time where life is created just prior to death. The male and the female return to their original birthplace with unerring accuracy after negotiating hundreds and sometimes thousands of miles of water. I relate this stage to the start of the idea of taking the Met and my own personal teaching philosophy at this point, which I would term as transmission in a lot of ways. Incubation of the eggs. The next stage in the life cycle is the incubation period, a very cloudy, scary time where there are many possibilities, but there are a lot of unknowns for our aspiring salmon or Met student. As I mentioned in the artifact, it is not a perfect metaphor, but offers some similarities in terms of my starting from scratch in higher education for a number of reasons. The literature certainly provided necessary resources and formed the basis for many other courses after the initial 4 core courses. Alevin, the core courses. Once the salmon breaks free of its protective covering, it will be sustained only by its own yolk sac until it starts to eat. Its chances of success are based on what it learns initially in its immediate physical environment. The basics are learned here. Cover and shelter equals safety and survival. The core courses provided the foundations and learning theory that I needed to be successful later on. The majority of my artifacts were individual endeavors, but several involved collaboration with other colleagues, which was beneficial, but also involved challenges in terms of communication. I found these courses in the new terminology and new tools, such as HTML and other concepts, extremely challenging and even frustrating at times. But in the end, they provided me with the theoretical knowledge that I could then apply to my elective courses. Fry, Par, the elective courses. Once the alevin leaves the red and starts to eat planktons and plants, it starts to explore its immediate environment and becomes more adventurous. Similarly, I had some solid background in learning theory which I could apply to new projects and assignments in the electives that I chose. I also had more choice in terms of picking which ones that I would take that might benefit my students via my teaching assignment. ETEC 522, Ventures in Learning Technology, showed me the business end of e-learning and allowed me to be creative and focus on an area of learning that could be financially viable, and reminded me a lot of Dragon's Den. ETEC 565 was probably the most hands-on useful course I took in terms of using and exploring many new Web 2.0 tools, including an online CMS, that of Moodle. Overall, these courses benefited my students directly and forced me to expand upon what I was already doing. Smolt stage, student work and assignments. This part of the metaphor sees the smolt or juvenile salmon mirroring in many ways what is going on with teenage secondary students, rather than being about my journey as the focus of this stage. I thought I would include some of the work that present and former students had undertaken as a result of assignments I undertook throughout the Met. Adult, reflections and additions to teaching philosophy. The adult salmon, while experienced, certainly continues to learn, both from his peers and from experiences with its oceanic environment. As an experienced Met student, I have had time to reflect and add to my own personal teaching philosophy. I very much support the ideas that are contained in a constructivist-oriented learning environment. The idea of facilitating and allowing students to take more self-responsibility for their learning with authentic experiences and scaffolding new information with past experiences is very attractive. The ePortfolio rubric and tools that I used. In developing my rubric, I benefited from having two other peers review what I had and also looking at their own and others and incorporating some of these features. Thanks to some individual and group review of other rubrics, I was able to come up with 6 categories for my ePortfolio: TQS requirements, reflection, artifacts, navigation and access, the way it was organized using my metaphor, and finally the presentation or the overall look and feel. By keeping it to 2 categories, I rationalized that the assessment would be less subjective. I used a variety of tools in creating my ePortfolio, including Paint.net, Scribefire, Win HT-Track website copier, a backup utility that allowed me to mirror and fully save all the images in my blog, Screencast-O-Matic, which I am using for this presentation or guided tour, Vuvox Collage, and lastly, Audacity. Thanks for watching my guided tour.